But when it comes to knowing the properties and the virtues of a plant, I think there is a approach that balances the intellectual knowledge with experiential understanding. And I think this is a really big distinction, and what can really accelerate one's learning of herbal medicine is bringing that experience in.
You're listening to the Feed Your Wild podcast, a conscious lifestyle show about all things nourishing for your body, mind, and soul. I'm Vanessa Rodriguez, and join me for candid conversations with changemakers, exploring health and wellness, food as medicine, intuition and spirituality, and nature-based practices that will transform your health and feed all parts of your wild self. Hello there, welcome to Feed Your Wild. This is your podcast host, Vanessa Rodriguez, functional nutritionist, Akashic record reader, intuitive nourishment guide. Today, we have Sajah Popham back on the podcast. If you tuned into last week, we had an encore episode with Sajah, and that was back from 2019. And it served as a wonderful primer leading up to this new interview with Sajah, the second time he's on the podcast. And we dive deep into all things Vitalist Herbalism, immune system, and building self-sovereignty and sufficiency with herbal medicine. As you know, a big part of the themes we've been exploring having a lot to do with self-sovereignty, self-sufficiency. How can we reclaim our ability to not just support ourselves and our families and communities in a holistic way, but also to reconnect to the medicine that was always the people's medicine. In our last conversation with Sajah, we talked about what he has coined evolutionary herbalism, and we covered a lot of what he talks about in his book with the same name, Evolutionary Herbalism. Sajah has a beautiful way of weaving in so much wisdom from all different parts of the world and lineages, as well as bridging the scientific with the spiritual. And in this interview, we get a little bit more specific on Vitalist Herbalism. So Sajah gives us a beautiful breakdown of what vitalism and Vitalist Herbalism mean to him, and how it's really different from what we could call allopathic herbalism, or working with herbs in a non-holistic way. And yes, it is possible to do so. Sajah gives some pretty good examples of vitalism through mechanisms of the body, such as a fever, and how to really support the natural responses of our body with the right herbs at the right time. Sajah shares his perspective on herbalism and its role in building self-sufficiency and reconnecting with basic life skills and bringing self-care back into our own hands. We then look at the immune system, and so Sajah talks about his view of immunity from a vitalist perspective and covers the best herbs for specific stages of immune health. And we get into herbal categories and herbs within each category, and then even common misconceptions of specific herbs. We also look at addressing lung support with Vitalist Herbalism, Sajah's perspective on lung support during COVID and why taking the wrong herb can potentially make things worse. He gives a good breakdown of how to identify which plants to use from a long list of herbs to choose from, and all of them perhaps being good for the same symptom, and what you need to look for in order to match the proper remedy to the person. There are so many wonderful and practical pearls of wisdom that Sajah drops in this conversation. And I feel personally that this is not just for people who are interested in working with herbs, but this is for everybody who's interested in healing, period. This conversation really invites you to look at what it means to view health, wellness, and the world through a vitalist lens. Sajah currently has an amazing free course that is happening right now, and it's only open for a few more days. So if you are interested in jumping on, we talk a little bit more about that in this interview. It's his free Vitalist Herbalism mini course. There's over 3 hours of content and guidebooks and workbooks to help you on your plant path. And he goes deeper into some of the topics that we cover, such as Vitalist Herbalism versus allopathic herbalism. He also teaches on how to do a holistic herbal intake. And one of my favorite classes, the art of formulation. If you are just starting out or you're plant curious, I definitely recommend checking it out. There's literally no cost. It's totally free. And I believe it closes down January 28th. So make sure to sign up for that before it goes away. You could click the links in the show notes. And Sajah also talks about his Vitalist Herbal Practitioner program that is currently open for enrollment right now, and how this was the program he wished he had when he first started. If you are interested in herbal medicine and bringing healing to your community, sharing plant medicine with the people and loved ones in your life, and reconnecting to this ancient relationship that we have with plants, reclaiming the sovereignty that comes with being able to heal yourself and your loved ones holistically, then you'll want to take a look at Sajah's program from the School of Evolutionary Herbalism that just opened up for enrollment online called the Vitalist Herbal Practitioner Program. I myself have taken this program, so I am speaking from not just someone who is familiar with Sajah's work and trusting him as a teacher, but literally receiving his teachings and putting them into practice and utilizing them in my own life and work with herbalism. This program gives you everything you need to practice herbalism in the most holistic and effective way so that you can get out there and start helping your community with plant medicine. In our interview, Sajah will give a little bit more background on the program, so you'll hear it from him directly. But some of the topics that are covered in the curriculum include herbal and nutritional therapies for common ailments, materia medica for all of the organ systems, holistic assessment tools, your anatomy and physiology, of course, even looking at Ayurvedic doshas and constitutional assessment, and how to build your herbal practice and create a business. If this is piquing your interest and you feel like this is for you, then I also have a special treat because I believe in this program so much. And I honestly feel like it's part of this larger shift that we are not only needing, but we're actually seeing take place right now, which is moving toward healing and creativity, reconnecting to nature and the power of plants and our ability to heal ourselves. So I decided to jump on and partner with Evolutionary Herbalism, and anybody who decides that this is the program for them steps in to join. If you use my special link, you will get access to a bonus, and that is my Feed Your Wild Gut program. In Feed Your Wild Gut, we cover functional nutrition and herbal medicine to energy healing and clearing, microbiome tending to soul reclamation, and you're getting a balanced blend of science, natural therapies, and intuitive and energetic approaches. From the astrological to herbal and supplementation, if you need probiotics, which ones to take, which tests will help you understand what's going on in your gut even more, and of course, the deeper spiritual aspects and information, how to address specific soul wounds related to your gut health. The doors to this program, the Feed Your Wild Gut, are not open any other time. I think we're going to open that probably in August. So this is your chance to jump in for free when you sign up for Sajah's program using my link. And of course, if you have any questions at all, you can just reach out to me. But if you sign up for my newsletter, then you'll be receiving more information and can just respond right over there. Doors close for Sage's program and for this opportunity to get this special bonus from me this Thursday, January 28th, the full moon in Leo. So if you're feeling the call, if this is like sounding really exciting for you, or you're feeling tingling, or you're just curious, then take some time to click the link and read through Sage's program website page and see if it's a good fit. Go to www.wildlyrooted.com/Vitalist program, all one word, or click the link in the show notes. All right, I threw a lot at you, and I think it's time to get into this conversation. So I'm going to stop talking, and let's move into our excellent interview with Sajah Popham. Welcome back, everybody, to Feed Your Wild. Today, I'm excited to have Sajah Popham back on the podcast. Sajah is the author of Evolutionary Herbalism and the founder of the School of Evolutionary Herbalism, where he trains herbalists in a holistic system of plant medicine that encompasses clinical Western herbalism, medical astrology, Ayurveda, and spagyric alchemy. His mission is to develop a comprehensive approach that balances the science and spirituality of plant medicine, focusing on using plants to heal and rejuvenate the body, clarify the mind, open the heart, and support the development of the soul. Sajah's approach honors and acknowledges the chemical, energetic, and spiritual properties of plants for a holistic model that uses the whole herb to heal the whole person. He lives on a homestead in the foothills of Mount Baker, Washington, with his wife, Whitney, where he teaches, consults clients, and prepares spagyric herbal medicines. Sajah, thanks for coming back on.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Vanessa. I've been really excited to chat with you again. I've always really enjoyed all of the conversations we've had in the past, so it's very exciting to be back on the show.
Yeah, well, it's one thing I didn't tell you, and I totally forgot to tell you. Well, our conversation was back in 2019, so for everyone listening, I'll have that link in the show notes for you so you can listen to it, because you do not want to miss that one. I think it'd be a really good primer for this conversation. But your episode was the top #1 episode of listened to episodes of 2019. So that was exciting.
That was cool.
Yeah, super cool. I was like, oh my God, because I just took a look. I was looking back for 2020. I was like, well, let me just take a look at 2019. And I was like, oh, perfect. I'll let Sajah know.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, I've also heard back from a lot of people that they are ready to step up their game when it comes to making their own medicine, to herbalism, food as medicine. And so I think this conversation is really timely. And I know you got a lot going on too around this topic, so I'm excited to discuss Vitalist Herbalism. And I think a really wonderful place to start for people, especially if they're not familiar, is diving into what does vitalism even mean? You know, what's the difference between a vitalist approach to health and herbalism? And how is that different from allopathic or mainstream herbalism? What does vitalism mean to you, Sajah?
Yeah, it's a really great question. It's a big question. And I think one of the main things to me that vitalism means is while it applies to herbalism and medicine, it's also really a larger kind of orientation of how we choose to see the world around us. To me, at the root of a vitalist mode of perception is really seeing that the world around us is alive, that the earth is alive, that there is an intelligence in nature, in the seasons, in the human body, in the plants. And as herbalists, obviously, that is where we really tend to focus on things, and seeing that these plants are alive and intelligent. They have sentience, that they aren't just a vehicle for biochemical constituents that affect our body in a very strictly scientific way, but there's a communication, there's a livingness, there's an intelligence in that relationship between how a plant interfaces with the human organism. And I think this is a really important kind of foundational orientation that an herbalist needs to cultivate because, you know, in our modern world, I think science has sometimes in subtle ways, sometimes in very clear ways, kind of trained us to think that this world that we live in is just a machine. It's a gear, that there's no life, there's no intelligence in it. And when we see the world around us in that way, it can really limit our understanding of this life, of our health, and how our medicinal plants function. And this is kind of, as you were mentioning, and it's kind of in contrast to more of a modern allopathic approach to medicine. And traditions all across the world had a vitalist worldview. And it really isn't until science became very dominant that way of seeing things has kind of not faded into obscurity. Obviously, there's still people that see the world in this way, but certainly has become a little bit less popular. And I think when we're looking at herbalism and health through the lens of vitalism, we really see that there's meaning behind things, that there's an intelligence there. And I think a really good example of that is just looking at health and looking at the dynamics of disease and symptoms, from more of an allopathic perspective. What's very common is the symptom is kind of seen as the enemy, right? The symptom is the problem, and to take those symptoms away so you feel good. Obviously, symptoms are unpleasant, and we don't want to feel symptoms because they don't feel good. But from a vitalist perspective, we see that the symptom is a communication. It's an intelligent response of vital force within the body to tell us that something is wrong. And from a vitalist orientation, we really listen to those symptoms. We really follow what the intelligence of the body is saying to us. And rather than suppressing those symptoms, rather than suppressing that communication, we listen to it, we follow it, we actually try to support it in what it's doing. I think one of the most straightforward examples of this is thinking about a fever. Conventionally speaking, fevers are suppressed almost 100% of the time, right? You get a fever, what do they say? Take an aspirin, it'll drop your fever down. That's great. You take the aspirin and you feel better, right? The fever goes down, your temperature goes down, and you feel better in the short term. The problem with that is, from a vitalist perspective, we see, this fever is an intelligent response of the body in the presence of some form of pathogen, a virus or bacteria. Something's wrong. And so, the body sees, there's something invading the system. So what are we going to do? Well, there's all this communication happening with the hypothalamus and the immune system. And we're going to close the pores of the skin. We're going to increase the basal temperature to raise that temperature up to the specific temperature needed to denature that pathogen, to fight that pathogen off. And so we see that fever is very, very intelligent. When we suppress a fever with something like an aspirin, you're actually prolonging that sickness. You're allowing that pathogen to continue to reproduce, to spread throughout the body. Say, suppressing a fever can turn maybe what might have been a 1 or 2 day fever into a 4 or 5 day fever. And this is where herbal medicine is incredible, because we have these herbal remedies that support the fever in doing its job. A category of plants we refer to as diaphoretics, where they actually increase blood flow to the periphery, they increase sweating, they help that fever to do its job. And that's central to the vitalist model. We're following the body, we're supporting the body, we're honoring its intelligence and using these plants in a way that is supporting that process. And I think that's a really critical approach to practicing holistic herbal medicine. And I think it's one of the big differentiating factors between a vitalist holistic approach versus an allopathic approach, because contrary to popular belief, herbalism can be practiced allopathically. It's not a matter of using a drug or an herb that makes you holistic. It's how you use the medicines that you use. And so, you could take something like willow bark or meadowsweet and suppress a fever, or you can use something like yarrow, elderflower, and peppermint to support that fever in doing its job. And so it's a very critical approach that has a very potent influence in how herbal medicine is practiced. But I think on a bigger level, it changes the way we view the world around us, that I think is really important in these times, that we are able to come to a state of awareness that recognizes that nature is intelligent, that our bodies are intelligent, and that we are a part of nature. And I think it's that separation from humans and nature that we have created, that separation kind of in our own minds, that is causing a lot of problems that we're facing in the world these days. So yeah, that's just a little bit on kind of the difference between vitalism and allopathic herbalism, and a little bit on what vitalism means to me.
I really appreciate the way you speak into that, and the innate intelligence within our own bodies and our environments and within the plants and our connection with the plants. You know, when I did my master's in human nutrition and functional medicine, I mean, it was a very science-based program and approach, and I had already had some experience with herbalism prior to that, so I was really excited about my upcoming botanical medicine classes, you know, and then I got the book that was for the class, and it was called Rational Phytotherapy. And I was like, what? What is that? What is this about? We did the class, and it ended up being so focused on the biochemical constituents and memorizing binomials and what is this plant good for and what's in the research. And literally all of the life that I had felt prior to that sucked out of the experience. I know there's a lot of people listening, and you yourself, Sajah, I'm sure you've had that experience in school too, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of people listening in, I can hear them saying like, man, there's just so much to memorize. How do I even begin to practice what you just spoke into, Sajah, this vitalist approach? So for the beginner, like what's one way to begin to practice vitalism? Or maybe it's not so much practice vitalism as it is experiencing that way of being.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think I'll kind of speak to it in general terms and then maybe zoom in a little bit more on the herbal aspect of it. And I think one of the simplest ways to really experience vitalism and how it's really looking at how environment, how the outside world is affecting the inside world, right? How there is this direct interface between our ecosystem, our environment, the seasons, the weather, and how that affects us on a physiological level, but also even how it affects us on a psychological and emotional level as well. And I think for me, and I didn't have the word vitalism at the time, but looking back, I realized it's exactly what it was. It was, I remember in my early 20s and just really coming to this epiphany of how the seasons changing really affected me and how I was a part of how the way the energy within my being was flowing was directly tied into the environment that I was in. And I think the more that we can become aware of, oh, interesting, when it gets really damp and cold outside, my arthritis flares up. Or, oh, when I eat these really hot, spicy foods, I start to get some heartburn. Or, right, it's just paying attention to how the outside world is directly interfacing and affecting us on a physical level. And how we're practicing vitalism all the time, really intuitively, I mean, it's a cold, rainy day here in Washington. Well, what do people usually aren't going to go make themselves smoothie and eat a salad on a cold, rainy day? No, it's like you want some hot soup, right? To balance that, to warm up that coldness. That's vitalism. That is striving to find a balance of our own self with the environment within which we're residing. And I think that really is at the core a lot of what it is all about. And there's kind of looking at it on that big general level. And obviously there's a lot of detail and specificity that can go into it depending on one's own constitution. But I think that's one of the best places to start, really paying attention to how the outer and the inner, how the outside world is affecting our inside world. Looking at it from more herbalism, yeah, I mean, when I was in university, it was very much what you were describing. A lot of science, a lot of biochemistry, a lot of use this herb for that symptom, which is helpful to an extent. I think to be an effective clinical herbalist, we have to know our herbs beyond just what types of symptoms they're good for. But I think one of the things that is one of the best ways to start incorporating a vitalist approach to studying herbal medicine is experience. Experience the plants. Don't just read about the plants. Don't just rely on books. taste the plants, make a tea, make a tincture, ingest the plant. Okay, we're learning about dandelion root. Well, rather than memorizing that dandelion root is bitter and works on the liver and stimulate digestion, maybe take a week to drink dandelion decoctions and taste how bitter it is and feel your digestion stimulated. Feel the rumbling in your stomach after you drink that tea before lunchtime. Notice the effect of the plant on your body. That is the best way to learn about herbal medicine. And no book, no workshop, no webinar, no training, no university level education can replace that. And I think that's one of the most important things that can be very easy to overlook is it's our culture, right? We're a book culture, we're a heady culture, we're an intellectually dominant culture. And I think it's not horrible, but I think it can also limit us in certain ways in that we tend to really rely on the intellect and we rely on memorizing things. And let's face it, memorization is temporal. It's easy to forget things we memorize, especially in conventional educational environments where you got to take the test, you got to memorize all this information, spit it out on the test to get your good grade. Then you're on to the next one, and most of that stuff you forget a couple weeks later. As herbalists, that's not a good way to really learn herbal medicine, right? You got to remember stuff. And I'm not really super into memorizing. Obviously, there is things that you just need to remember, right? You're talking about the binomials. Yeah, sometimes you just got to drill it in of what the Latin names of the plants are. Sometimes there's no way around it. But when it comes to knowing the properties and the virtues of a plant, I think there is a approach that balances the intellectual knowledge with experiential understanding. And I think this is a really big distinction and what can really accelerate one's learning of herbal medicine is bringing that experience in. It's something I always talk about as an interesting phrase in our English language, which is to learn something by heart. And you think learn it by heart versus or juxtaposed to memorizing. At the surface, they're kind of the same thing, right? Like you just know something. But what's the difference between learning by heart versus memorizing? Well, to me, learning something by heart is integrated into your being. It's something that's like anchored, it's grounded. And usually we learn something by heart we have experienced ourselves. And it's a lot more solid that way. And I think the best way to learn a plant by heart is to experience it, to go out into the forest and to sit with the plant, look at the plant, to touch it, to taste it, to prepare it as a medicine, to ingest it, to experience all the stuff that you read about and hear about those plants. Experience it for yourself. And that way we tend as humans to remember our experiences, but we forget things we read about all the time. So I think that's probably one of the best ways to incorporate a vitalist approach to studying herbal medicine. Put the medicine where your mouth is and really pay attention to how those plants affect you, and you will remember it. I usually encourage my students to, I always say it's better to know a small handful of remedies inside and out really, really well than hundreds of remedies superficially. So I always like to encourage my students, just pick one plant a month. Right? One plant a month and just go deep into that one plant. Like I was saying, sit with it, touch it, taste it, feel it, drink it, take a tincture, take it and really sit with the feeling of it. Take it in drop doses, take it in tablespoon doses if it's safe to do so. Like really experience the spectrum of that plant. And at the same time, pull your books out, right? Ayurveda say about that plant? What does Chinese medicine say about that plant? What does Unani Tib say about it? The Greeks, the North American traditions, study all those things too. I sometimes get misunderstood, I think, where they're like, oh, so we don't need to read about plants. I'm like, no, like Paul Bergner always says, if you're going to reinvent the wheel, it's probably going to be round. You don't have to start from scratch with learning about the plants. Definitely we are blessed with vast resources of knowledge and information in this modern information age that we're in. So use it, but don't let it get in the way of that direct experience.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I know that you've dived into many of those various aspects and ways of communing with the plants and studied all these different cultures and traditions. And, your words really make me think about how we're all born vitalists. When we think about little kids experiencing the world, it's like they're constantly putting things in their mouth, right? Like walking around and tasting this, tasting that, as animals do as well. And so it's like this innate built-in way to commune and learn and to know what it is that you're connecting with through the senses. And obviously, there's a certain level of discernment, right, that we have to build so that it doesn't become dangerous. But I feel that a lot of this kind of brings me back to this theme that we've been talking about. And before we hopped on the podcast, Sajah and I discussed this a little bit, but it's this notion of sovereignty. And over the year, like this entire past year of 2020, and then now bleeding into 2021, there's been like this evolution of this notion of sovereignty that we've been talking about on the podcast. And at first, it really started within the mind and thinking for ourselves and building discernment in terms of like our own lives and getting to know our truth. And then it started to move into the body and experientially, what does sovereignty mean? And then that becoming self-sufficiency, especially with our episode that we had with Penny Kelly, which was posted on January 11th. So I'll make note to have that in the show notes as well. But she really talks about how important it is to build self-sufficiency and in a very practical way and what that looks like. And to me, this is all about coming back to sovereignty in terms of like just knowing how to take care of ourselves in connection with Mother Earth as this living being and these plants as living beings. And so when I think about working with herbs and communing with herbs as medicine in a holistic way as part of this self-sovereignty, I think it would be wonderful to maybe ground this into some specific examples. And I know you mentioned fever, which is awesome because I wanted to touch on immunity. And obviously, this is the peak of flu season, regardless of the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic still. So a lot of people are talking about the immune system, and there's a lot that is being in circulation on the internet about how to boost your immune system, how to treat a cold and flu, back and forth about elderberry and all this. What do you see are maybe some of the biggest pieces that people are missing when it comes to tending to our immune system using herbs? And what would a sovereign vitalist approach look like?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And well, touching on some of the things that you were mentioning there about sovereignty and self-sufficiency, I definitely think herbalism is a huge part of that. It is bringing our self-care and healthcare back into our own hands. I think it's, traditional people all over the world, whether they were an herbalist or not, they still had a very rudimentary knowledge of specific remedies that grew in their environment that they could just use to take care of themselves. And I think that just comes back to basic, like we were saying before we started the interview, just basic life skills on what it means to be a human being living on this Mother Earth in accordance with the natural system that we're a part of. I think that's a really big part of that in terms of, humans just being aware of the plants that grow in their ecosystem. And I think as herbalists, that's a big part too, is, not as being a sovereign herbalist is knowing your local remedies. I've always been a big proponent of local medicine for local people. We're exposed to the same environment, the same weather. I think there's a reason why certain plants grow in certain places and why certain people have certain common recurring health conditions in those specific environments. And, there's a reason that those plants grow there because they're specifically tailored to helping people that live there. And so I always like to encourage my students and herbalists in general to work with their local remedies. And this became super clear to my wife, Whitney, and I when the whole pandemic started. It was very interesting seeing how many herbal companies were sold out of a lot of stuff. A lot of herbal companies actually just shut down because there was a global pandemic and people weren't working and places were closing. And I was like, wow, look at that. Like you can't get certain tinctures right now. You can't get certain bulk herbs right now. What would happen if you couldn't go to your local co-op or herb store or go online and purchase herbal remedies? What would you do? Well, it's like sometimes people are like, I have no idea what I would do. And like, go out into the woods, like go outside. It's growing all around us, right? And I think that's one big lesson learned, for us during this whole COVID situation is like, yeah, I really can see in the future herbalists needing to kind of go back to the way herbalism was practiced a long time ago, that was really just using a lot of the plants that grow in that immediate vicinity. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that because I think that is a big piece of what it means to be a sovereign herbalist, a self-sufficient herbalist. Whitney did a really good podcast with a clinical herbalist over there in England, and she's got a great book called Self-Sufficient Herbalism, and it's all about stocking your own apothecary, growing all the medicinals, wildcrafting, how to just kind of do it all yourself. It's a super, super inspiring book. A really good book. It's a unique herb book, which I like to see a new unique herb book come out. And I am totally blanking on her name right now, but that was some unique perspectives that she had.
I'll put that in the show notes too, if you want to share that with me. And I can, yeah, that sounds awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So on the immune system discussion, yeah, this is always a big question, especially these days. Yeah, with immunity, I think it really, before herbs even come into the equation, I think it just really comes down to self-care. If you're not getting an adequate amount of rest, if you're not eating good food, if you're not drinking enough water, it's just the basic stuff that we all know, but it's so basic, it's easy to overlook. I think those are really the foundations of immunity, is just making sure that we are properly taking care of ourselves. And especially, I think one of the big things that tends to deplete people's immune systems is the stress. It's just super clear that, whoa, when did you get sick? Oh, last week. Oh, did you get stressed out? Oh, yeah, I got really stressed out right before I got sick. It's like the one common theme that we always see is people get sick when they get stressed. And when they get stressed, they're maybe drinking too much coffee, not eating good. They're not taking proper care of themselves. And so I think it really just boils down to self-care and eating good, healthy, real food, drinking good, clean water, getting enough rest, not pushing ourselves too hard. And I think there's also a degree of, how do I say it? I guess the only phrase that's coming to mind is like a degree of psychological protection. I think a lot of people are consuming a lot of media. I think a lot of people are scrolling through a lot of social media, and I'm not so sure how healthy it is. I'm not so sure that people are being well served by consuming, especially social media side of things. I just can't tell you, like, I don't use social media. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram, like personally. And I've never really got it. All my friends kind of make fun of me. They're like, oh, you're kind of a daft when it comes to social media. Like, I don't really know what to do on there. I get bored. But I know so many people that are on it all the time. And I can't tell you how many times I just see people that are like, they're doing all right, doing good. And then they like see some posts and then they're all in a tizzy and all stressed out and all like, oh, what do we do? And blah, blah, blah. And I just see it and I'm just like, man, I don't really know if that's how good that is, And then the next day they're like, oh yeah, it turns out that wasn't even true, And I'm like, geez, like, it's just like getting all stressed out over nothing. So that's another piece of it that I think I just see in the culture that I'm not so sure how healthy it is. So bringing it back to the herbs though. Yeah, herbs are amazing for our immune system. Herbs are incredible for helping to replenish and restore the vitality of the body. Certainly, the way I think of immunity is more kind of basic division of herbal categories is we have things like our immune tonics, or commonly referred to as adaptogenic remedies. These are plants and fungi that usually are ingested while you're healthy to keep you healthy. So these are herbs that you use to rejuvenate and strengthen a weak and deficient and depleted immune system. I think these are some of the most important remedies for people to be working with that do feel like they catch every little cough, cold, flu that comes around the bend, to especially in the winter month, to just keep their immune system strong. really common remedies there. Big one from Chinese medicine would be astragalus, reishi mushroom, cordyceps mushroom, pretty much all the medicinal mushrooms, shiitake, maitake, all of them are incredible immune system tonics. I do not place things like echinacea in this category. Echinacea is more of, and that kind of brings us into our second category, which is more acute immunostimulation. Those are the things that you usually would work with during some form of acute infection, that to stimulate the immune system into a greater level of activity and enable us to have that strength to fight off an infection. I do think it's kind of a big misunderstanding with echinacea. Sure, it's an immune stimulant, but traditionally echinacea was really used more as what we refer to as an alterative for the lymphatic system and the blood. It was an old snake remedy used for snake bites, sepsis, blood poisoning, really serious like infections in the blood. A lot of people take echinacea at the instant sign of a scratchy throat or something like that, and that really isn't the way it was traditionally used. A lot of herbalists say it actually doesn't even really have that great of an affinity for the respiratory system. Others disagree with that. As with all things, there's always two sides. The other thing I think that is very important to mention is astragalus here, actually, because a lot of people go online, they're searching immune system boosting herbs, and astragalus usually always comes up. And so people get sick and they're like, oh, astragalus is really great for the immune system. And I just cringe every time I see that, because that is actually one of the key contraindications for using astragalus in the Chinese tradition, which is where that plant comes from, which is an acute condition, an acute infection. You never use astragalus in an acute infection because it actually is said to drive it deeper into the body. This is a remedy that is used while you are healthy to keep you healthy, strengthening the lungs and things like that. But if there is an acute infection, it's really like not the right remedy to use. So I just want to mention that because I think there's a lot of misinformation about astragalus, a lot of misuse of astragalus. And I think it's an important point to clarify because it can actually make you more sick. Just some of my thoughts on the immune system and just general self-care and some of the primary herbal categories that I tend to think of in terms of immune health.
Well, I think those are wonderful examples of looking at there are various stages in terms of immune health. There's prevention, and then there's acute, and also affinities for certain organ systems or part of the body. And one of the biggest ones that I hear a lot from clients, especially, and I'm even thinking about you, Dad, if you're listening to this podcast episode, is our lungs. And obviously with COVID and a lot coming up in terms of respiratory challenges and infections and even like post-infectious issues, people have a lot of questions about lung health and respiratory health and how to utilize herbs for our lungs when it comes to our immune system. So in terms of that like vitalist approach of looking at that, because there's so much there that I think people aren't aware of when they haven't been using herbs and they just kind of see this long list of things that are helping out for their lungs to protect them. What are some things that you might look at to help people listening in and kind of having a really good lens to begin with?
Yeah, really good question. And it ties in actually very nicely to the conversation on vitalism too, because this is one of the things about allopathic herbalism, again, that is a little pet peeve of mine, is you can go online and be like, oh, these herbs are for the lungs, and big lists of herbs. And on that list, you'll see plants like osha and lomatium and usnea and elecampane and echinacea and licorice and lobelia and pleurisy root and marshmallow root, right? All those herbs I just listed, great respiratory remedies. All those herbs listed, very different kinds of respiratory remedies. Some cases, they'll be really beneficial. Some cases, they'll actually make things worse. And so this is where we bring in a very core concept in vitalist systems of herbal medicine, which is the concept of energetics. And when I say energetics, we're not speaking about some esoteric woo-woo spiritual property. We're really looking at more of the ecological influence on the body. Central to a vitalist model is seeing that the human body is a mirror of nature. It's an ecosystem. It's not a machine. It's not just a big biochemical machine, that it is a mirror of the environment. And one of the main ways that we see that is through some very simple polarities in terms of the state of the human body. And these are actually ways that we describe weather, right? Temperature and moisture are the two big ones there. So hot, cold, wet, and dry. So in that way, we're practicing energetics all the time, right? Like I said earlier, on a cold day, what do? Drink some hot soup or a hot cup of tea. On a hot summer day, what do? We drink lemonade and eat berries because they naturally cool us off. We're constantly balancing the energetics of the body, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unconsciously, just kind of moving off of instinct. But with the respiratory system, energetics are really key. The respiratory system is lined with a mucosal membrane whose job is to secrete mucus that is rich in antibodies, immune factors. With each inhalation and exhalation, the lungs are expanding and contracting. Therefore, there's a lot of friction there. So there has to be adequate lubrication in the respiratory system because it's moving all the time. Mucosal membrane, the health of the mucosal membrane is really, really important whenever you're assessing the respiratory system, especially in terms of moisture, right? Is the mucosa dry or is the mucosa damp? And anyone that's ever had a cough or heard someone with a cough, you can hear the difference, right? You know the difference between the really gurgling, bubbling, mucusy cough where you cough and there's all this phlegm coming up, right? You cough and it sounds all gurgly and bubbly in there versus a dry cough where it's really wheezy and you cough and nothing comes up and it just feels really tight and dry in there. So that differential of energetics is very, very important when treating the respiratory system. And one of the things that's pretty common with COVID is that we're seeing a very dry cough being present. Now, the unfortunate thing is that a lot of people are going online and being like, what herbs are good for the lungs? Or what herbs are antiviral and good for the lungs? And one of the big ones that constantly comes up there is OSHA. And a lot of people are reaching for OSHA to treat their lungs. And when you have a dry cough and you take OSHA, which is a very pungent, very warming, very resinous, very rich in essential oils. It's a hot plant and it's a dry plant. And when you take a remedy like that with a dry cough, it can be very, very aggravating to the lungs and actually make the cough worse. The inverse is true when people have a really wet cough and they start to, they see, oh, marshmallow is good for a cough. And so they maybe start drinking marshmallow tea. Well, marshmallow is demulcent and it's very moistening. It causes that mucosal membrane to secrete more fluids, which in most cases, you don't really want to have happen when someone has a very damp cough. And so this understanding the energetics of the plants is critical, I think, for all vitalist, holistically oriented herbalists, because this is one of the things that can be very easily overlooked, both in the energetics of the plants as well as the energetics of the tissue states of organ systems. And this is why sometimes people take herbs and they're like, yeah, I tried that, it didn't work. Or yeah, I tried that, it made me worse. This is oftentimes one of the reasons that happens, is that the remedies aren't matched to the specific state of the person and the afflicted organ system. So when it comes to treating the respiratory system, I think that is a really critical piece that folks should look at and understand before you start taking a bunch of remedies, because there's a lot of plants that affect the lungs. That's one of the, again, a little pet peeve of mine is when you see those big lists, here's all the herbs that are good for the lungs, and marshmallow, OSHA, lobelia, all affect the lungs, all very, very different in their influence.
I think these are incredible examples for people, because there's so many folks that have been reaching out to me, or clients that I've been seeing, that are dealing with some issue, whether it be a respiratory issue or urinary tract issue or reproductive issue. And we see these themes constantly of, here are the primary herbs or foods or whatever that are good for XYZ. And I think what you're really inviting everybody to do is to first tune into their own bodies and experience. So know what is actually going on. How does it feel? Like, what does it actually feel like in this body with this symptom? And then communing with the plant or understanding those energetics of a plant to make a match. That's a match made in heaven. And I think this also probably complicates, I would imagine it complicates research on these plants because not everybody is going to have the same issues like at the root, and the energetics are different. So those matches might not connect, right?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, and that's where that's why I think it's really good to have good materia medicas on hand from herbalists that do work with the energetics of the plants. And it is all about, like you said, it's all about specificity. And for a lot of years, I've been kind of like a little bit up on a soapbox of being like, as an herbalist, just knowing what an herb is, quote, good for isn't enough. It's not enough. While at the same time, there are herbs that are really excellent for very specific conditions and diseases, right? When you look at something like hyperthyroidism, melissa or lemon balm, bugleweed, lycopus, these are very specific remedies. Motherwort, very specific plants that are great for hyperthyroidism. But then there's certain conditions and certain situations where just knowing the name of the disease isn't quite enough to be able to match the plants to the person. So there's a little bit more drilling down into not just, oh, you have this disease, these herbs are good for that disease, but really like engaging with the person, talking to the person, assessing a person that is central to an effective herbalist. That you got to really dig into the details of how is that unique person manifesting that symptom or disease uniquely in their own situation, and then going from there.
Well, I know that everybody who's still listening is really interested in building their confidence in their ability to connect with our plant allies and to practice truly holistic herbal medicine. And I'm really excited about your program, which you have opened your doors to. And this is a program that my partner Armando and I have also done before. And it's just, Sajah, I cannot speak more highly about how in-depth and detailed and truly holistic, providing frameworks and all sorts of things for people to study and to really dive deeply in with the plants. So I'd love for you to talk about what is this program and anything you'd like to mention, kind of given the rest of our conversation as it relates to sovereignty, like building sovereignty with these skills.
Yeah, well, currently we are in our 2021 enrollment period for our Vitalist Herbal Practitioner Program. And this course is really, as with a lot of my courses, it was kind of the course that I was looking for that I couldn't find. And so I ended up just hunkering down and putting it together myself. This is a course that is really ultimately designed to give an herbalist everything that they need to know and learn and understand in order to be an effective herbal practitioner, seeing clients, whether that's clinically, whether that's just helping out yourself and your family with herbs. You want to know more about health. This course is designed to give you everything that you need to know to do that. So it really focuses on the organ systems of the body, understanding them scientifically, so through anatomy, through physiology, through pathology, but also understanding them energetically, like I was just talking about. So how these different tissue states affect the organ systems, what types of categories of plants do you consider for those organ systems, specific materia medica listings and formulation strategies to treat the most common symptoms and diseases that you'll face in those organ systems, but by getting to the root cause, not just simple palliation. There's also a lot of focus on holistic assessment and evaluation. I think this is an area of herbal medicine that can very easily be overlooked, in that we all get into herbalism usually because we love plants and we love nature and we focus all this energy on the plants, and then sometimes we overlook the people. And so there's a lot of really important teachings around how to do proper intake of people, how to assess the pulse and the tongue, how to do a good interview, how to get all the information that you need from a person in order to know what remedies will be most beneficial for them. And so the course has really been strategically designed to take someone through kind of these stages of development that move you from kind of introductory novice level herbalist up to being able to have the confidence, because you now have the competence to work with people in a clinical context or in a way where you can just help people with herbal medicines. I say clinical, and that really freaks some people out. Maybe you just want to be able to help your friends and family. To me, that's clinical. Anytime you're talking to someone about a health concern and you're administering them a remedy, that's clinical to me. So that really is what the Vitalist Herbal Practitioner course is all about. And we also have a very small free course that's going to be open for a few more days that people can check out. There's 3 videos that kind of digs into a lot more detail on some of these core concepts that are woven throughout the larger program, that people are more than welcome to consume those free videos to see if the larger course might be a good option for you. And, I've really also very specifically designed the course to be consumable for both beginners as well as advanced practitioners. So we've had people that don't know anything about herbalism go through this course and significantly build up their knowledge base and understanding of holistic use of herbal medicines, to advanced practitioners, NDs, acupuncturists, clinical herbalists come through the course to just level up their skills even more, getting more insights and perspectives on how they can best serve their patients and clients. This is not necessarily, if someone's brand new to herbalism, it's not going to be way over their head. I've really specifically designed it knowing that people that are new will be coming through it. So yeah, that's just a little bit about the Vitalist Herbal Practitioner program.
Yeah, and I highly recommend anybody who wants a taste to definitely check out Sajah's Vitalist Herbalism mini course. Of course, all these links in the show notes, but just to give you a glimpse into that, because Sajah, you don't hold back. Like, each one is over an hour. So each lesson, it's not like these are little mini email blips or something. These are like full on classes. And so you go even more deeply into the vitalist perspective versus allopathic, which I appreciate, the holistic intake roadmap, which as myself as a clinical practitioner, I'm like, why don't they really teach this in clinical programs? I've had to come into this on my own over the many years. If I would have had this when I first started, game changer. So that I was really excited you talked about that. And then the pillars of strategic formulation, which was so much fun. Formulation is so much fun, Sajah, and you make it even more fun the way you talk about it.
Yeah, I love formulation. It's probably one of my favorite aspects of herbal medicine. Each herb is like a color on your palette. And to me, there's an artistry and science to formulation that I just absolutely love.
Yeah, well, all of those are free in your mini course. So for anybody who maybe now's not the right time to dive into a program, please check out that mini course because it's free and there's so much information there. And I also wanted to mention that I'm really excited about this program, and I have so much confidence that anybody who's interested is going to absolutely love it. I'm tacking on a bonus. So anybody who is interested and wants to dive into the Vitalist Herbalist Practitioner program, I'm going to offer you a bonus of my Feed Your Wild Gut program, which I think would be really complimentary to this. So that's a value of $444. It's Feed Your Wild Gut, Cultivate Vital Gut Health and Intuitive Connection for Radical Transformation. I launched it once before. It was awesome. So many people going through, and there's so much there in terms of like physiological, the mystical, the multidimensional, powerful nature of your gut. And I think that in conjunction with everything that you'll be learning with Sajah, I'm so excited about offering this.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'll make sure to have all the details on how you guys can get access to that. You have to use a specific link so that we can track so that I know that you're actually going through the program. But we'll make sure to hook you up. And I just thought it would be so much fun to bring that bonus in as well. So I know we're at time here, Sajah. We're already over, and I appreciate you sticking on with us. But I cannot let you go without answering this question. I know we asked you this back in 2019, but a lot has shifted and changed in, just a little over a year. And I'm really curious, what is currently feeding your wild, whether that's body, mind, or soul right now?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I think for me, well, I recently became a father, and so that has been a pretty big game changer for me in my life. I think it's just been such an incredible journey to witness the beginnings of life, this fresh little human being, and how, yeah, there's just something about the purity of a child. Never made a mistake, never made a wrong turn, never done anything wrong, that purity. And it just, to me, it kind of makes me think about this life and how we as human beings grow and develop and turn into who we are. And it just makes me think about how I want to raise my son and being a part of this Mother Earth and the importance of that connection to nature and the importance of having this next generation, of really just seeing the world. It's like, whoa, it's kind of an intense time to be bringing a life into this world and just seeing kind of how much the technology I see is really taking over and how much just the phones and the social media. And it's just seeing like, wow, how important it is to have humans coming into this world that have a connection to nature and have a connection to the earth, and how important that is really inspiring me to learn new skills and gather new skills myself. I always have so much more to learn, and I think about all the things that I want to teach my son. And I'm like, oh, those are things that I need to learn first, and so that's been feeding my wild, as you say, to think about that, think about my child and what kind of person he's going to be, and just how important it is, like I said, to have these humans coming into this world that have that reverence and respect and appreciation of the wildness of the world. I think that's going to be really important for the earth. So yeah, that's kind of what comes to mind as you ask that question. It just makes me think about my son and the way that I want to raise him. And I think that's been the big thing that's been feeding that within myself. So yeah, thanks for the question. It's a good question.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. I love that. And it makes me think about, my sister gave birth a couple months ago. It's brought a lot of thoughts about the future in a different way than I think I've been sitting with the future prior to him coming in. And what's interesting too is I just recently pulled a tarot card actually for this podcast episode, which is interesting because I don't typically feel called to do that unless it's like, I don't know, more of like a spiritually based episode. But something told me to pull a card and I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I'll do it. And I got the Four of Wands, which to me is kind of all about kind of like homecoming, like returning home and to familiarity and feeling supported and secure and celebrating our rites of passage and joy that comes with it. And I feel like what you just mentioned kind of reminds me of this card. It's like coming back to who we are, like as these beings entering this realm, and what kind of world we can create when we just reconnect back to that aspect of ourselves, that our true nature. So that was really beautiful. Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely. Yeah, Four of Wands. Good card.
Well, for anybody who is interested in more, I highly recommend you check out Sajah's work. Sajah, where's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, you can find us on our website, which is evolutionaryherbalism.com. We also got our Instagram feed over there at Evolutionary Herbalism. I think there's an underscore in between the two, on Facebook too. And those are the best places to find us in the interwebs.
Awesome. Well, Sajah, thank you so much again for coming on, sharing all your knowledge and goods, and congratulations on all the beautifulness that has come your way over the past year, despite all the other challenges that we've been facing.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Vanessa. I really appreciate it. And it's always a pleasure to be on your show. And I always like talking with you. You know, you have good perspectives and insights and helping a lot of people out there with your words. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Hey there, I made something for you. One of the biggest challenges that I hear from people is that they are feeling stuck when it comes to their health. You're a smart, capable, and creative change maker, right? And you know what you should be doing for your health. So what gives? Well, it's not about willpower. And I wanted to create something that would help you to unlearn the things that are keeping you stuck so that you can get out of your own way and master the mindset of health. That's why I created Wildly Unstuck, where you'll learn the top 5 things that I have found to sabotage your health goals and what to do about them. You'll learn what it really takes to become committed and unstoppable when it comes to your health goals and find the clarity you've been looking for so you know exactly what to do to get back into alignment. And I made it totally free. So if this is something that you want to dive into and create a vision and soul goals for your health and your life and bring your gifts to the world, because we know that we need it, then I invite you to join us in Wildly Unstuck. You can find that at wildlyrooted.com/unstuck. I'll see you on the other side.